Welcome to I Took a Hike. I'm your host, Darren Mass. Here, we record our podcast just a little bit differently. Instead of a room filled with booms and mics, we take our guests on a hike. We go on an adventure to learn about their achievements and failures, and then take a deep dive into their journey, all while hiking. Here, I am being interviewed by our social media manager, Helen. And why? So our hikers can get to know me just a little bit better. I share my story with you in hopes to inspire and motivate. Happy hiking!
Hello, Darren. How are you today?
Hello, I am great.
Well, I'm so excited for this week for us to dive deep into a little bit about you. I know that, you having a successful exit and working a very long time in the entrepreneurial space. I think a lot of people would love to know how you have been able to manage being a father, a husband, and a boss in the office space. And this doesn't just go for fathers and dads out there. I think it'd be helpful for moms as well, because there are CEOs that are women and moms, and sometimes that juggling is difficult. So I'd love to know, one, you know I know that you met your wife at the beginning of your venture of your business. So, kind of how you were able to navigate and manage that, and if you had any, I guess, struggles in the beginning, and what the cues were that you're like, okay, I need to fix this and spend more time here and less time there.
So you want me to go to the Wayback Machine? I met Christy in a dog park. I was not the creep without a dog. I actually had a dog, and I was just staying there for way too long. It was a beautiful day, and in she walked into a Manhattan dog park, Madison Square Dog Park, and I met the love of my life, and I knew I was going to marry her right away. At that time, I was a CEO. I had a whopping zero customers, and I was in business for 3 months. I did tell her I was a CEO because that sounded cool, and I think that worked. That line was dropped, and it did work. But I will say that at that time, I didn't want a girlfriend. I didn't have an envision for any relationships because I was so dedicated to my business. So one of the first things that I discussed with Christy when we've just met each other, probably after a few dates, is you have to understand I'm on a mission and I'm dedicating myself to the business. And I absolutely like you. I want to have a relationship with you. I want to, hang out with you, but please understand that the work has to come first. I don't mean that I'm ignoring you as a human. I understand you have emotional needs as do I. But if, we're on a date and the phone rings and it's an emergency from a customer, that takes priority. And she agreed. And I was very lucky because she knew that world very well. Her father was always a chief level officer. So she always saw him get up from a table to take that phone call or answer that email or work on a vacation. So I was fortunate in the fact that she truly did understand that world. And it did help that she was just graduating college at the time. So she wasn't always available either. She was getting through college, and it just worked out that way. Fast forward, as a family man, we kept that understanding up. You know, Before I went on my first vacation with her, must have been the first year and a half, almost 2 years of business. I was making $0, no money, but I had a little savings left. A credit card that I took out that was 15 months interest free. So I was living off of that, paying the minimums. I remember turning to her and saying, here's my goal. When we get to 50 customers, we will go on a vacation. And I told her mom that, and her mom just loved that I had a drive and a goal. And then we did it. I got to 50 customers. And that's when we scheduled our first really lavish vacation. We went on a Carnival cruise, the inside cabin, the entire trip for 4 days with my wife. My girlfriend at the time and myself was $263. And that was a lot of money. I was sweating it. I remember I was sweating. How am I going to pay this? But anyway, I paid it. Long and the short of it, family man and all that. I did neglect parts of the family in the beginning because I was dedicated to this mission. I am an obsessive person when it comes to having a mission, and many people, many high achievers are as well. And it took a while for me to realize importance of balance, making sure that if you are a family man, family woman, family person, you do take the time to nurture the relationships. You spend time with your kids. You don't neglect that half that is so critically important for your work and business success. The support of a loving family and partner matters the most. And that it took me a while to realize that. But I would say fifth or sixth year in business, that's when I started leaving the office at the right time. So I made dinner every single night, not physically making it, made sitting down at the table, being present. Was I always great at this? No, I was not. My head was down. My wife would joke that she sees the top of my head more than anything else, right? Many of us can relate. Now I try my best to not do that. I'm aware. There are sometimes, even now, with what I'm doing lately, I violate these principles as well. But then sometimes I hear that little voice saying, wait, put the phone down. You don't need to respond to that post or that email right now. You could wait. So
Mhm.
it's the balance that we have to find.
Yeah, I think that's, you know, it's so hard for everyone to find that balance, especially when you're new to that, right? Like you said, it took 5, 6 years, and it's a sacrifice for you, right? You're, excuse me, you're like a businessman, truly, and you're like beelining it. And so I understand you making this sacrifice, and you're like, but it's not just for me, it's for us. And kind of making that excuse in your head. But in the end, like you said, you recognize and you're like, I need to make it home for dinner. Or even I remember you saying you really try to, pick up and drop off your kids at school. And those do kind of seem not very important. But at the end of the day, like I remember who dropped me off at school and who picked me up, right? And even though we may not talk in the car or do anything extravagant or fun, it is that like extra 5, 10 minutes. And I can even see, some of my friends that they're not necessarily CEOs or entrepreneurs, but I can see sometimes they're like, well, I would rather make, X dollar amount or go to this client, event than to drop off my kid or pick him up from school or see a soccer practice. And, but over time, that becomes a habit. And then you're just no longer there present for your kids or
Yeah.
family. So,
Well, the new way I do things is now I absolutely schedule the time. My day, my work day, that is, does not start until 11 a.m. every single day. I rarely, if ever, violate that. It has to be some true reason to violate that. But I wake up, I get my kids up, my three daughters. I help them with breakfast, make sure they get their teeth brushed, which is every parent can relate is a challenge getting your kids to brush their teeth. Um, we get them out the door. I drop them off at school. I hit the gym or I go to boxing classes with my wife because that's something we enjoy. I take me time. I do LinkedIn work in between. Yes, I look like the weirdo speaking in his AirPods, in between sets and reps. But yeah, I don't start client meetings or hikes or anything until 11 o'clock on, simply because that is my time. And that is, I'll say that's the luxury I was able to build in my life because that was a lifestyle goal. I'm a big believer in not setting monetary goals, but setting life goals because the number doesn't really work out. So, what do I mean by that? If you say you can't wait, you're going to set a goal for 10 years from now to make $1 million. That's an awesome goal. $1 million is a lot of money, but in 10 years, it's not. And the reason why it's not is because it won't be as worth what it is worth today. And your lifestyle will have grown and changed. You'll be doing more things, going out to eat more, because if you're earning up to $1 million, that's your life. So the number doesn't really equate there. But if you set a lifestyle goal to, I want to own a house, I want to own a car, I want to not work until 11 a.m., those are real goals. Those are smart goals.
mhm. And so, would you say that setting aside time is just something that you recognized later on, or you've always kind of like, sorry, what I mean is like, you were saying like you set aside time, right? Like you schedule it in, you're like, okay, this is when I start. Was that something that you realized that's the only way that you could make time and make it work? Or was it because of another reason?
Um, as you get older, you get a little wiser, I think. That was not my mentality originally. My mentality, since I've been working at 9 years old, my mentality was to make money, right? What can I do to generate money? That's the American way. That's the American dream. How can I make the most of it? How can I hustle? How can I take myself out of this, medium position, this middle class road, and one up my parents, my grandparents, and generations before? That was my hustle that I knew. When I started my telecom company, it wasn't about making money, and I didn't have a reason for it other than the fact that I wanted to do the best I could do to be the best version of me. I was doing it with passion and purpose and drive and all of the cliched words, but it wasn't about money. But I'm sure subconsciously it really was. And for me, it took until these last few years to realize that, you know, the balance of time and being present is more important than the money. Now, I know what everyone's going to think. It's easy to say when you've made a lot of money. Yeah, you're right. It is. But it's one of those things where we've heard the old man in his story saying on his deathbed, his biggest regret, not being in his children's lives. That is very true, right? So maybe you don't have the luxury of telling your boss or your manager or your business owner that I want to come in every day at 11 a.m. because I want to spend time with my wife and my kids. That's not a reality for most people. But what is a reality is maybe you wake up that extra half hour earlier with your kids. You figure out that little bit of sacrifice that you can be in your children's lives because that's ultimately the only thing that matters. Because we can't
Mm-hmm.
take the money with us, we can't take the things with us, and we're not creating memories for ourselves. I think we get that wrong too. I'm not creating memories for me. I'm creating memories for my children. And hopefully they will pass those experiences. Like you said, you remember who took you to school. Well, hopefully my children remember who took them to school and do the same for their children. So when I'm no longer here, I've made a lasting impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. People do say, "Oh, they only say that because they have the money or they made the money," right? And
We used to say that
yeah,
too,
and being able to start your day at 11 a.m., that is a great luxury for sure. And then do you pick up your kids too, or does your
so
wife?
I used to when I hit my really great depression, right? When I was purposeless, no drive, no more desire. I felt myself even getting stupider. I was doing everything. And that's not a knock on any. That's just for me, that wasn't checking off what my purpose was. Now I
Mm-hmm.
don't. Now Christy, my wife, she takes care of that because here we are. I'm working again. I'm doing the
Mm-hmm.
thing that I love the most. I'm
Yeah.
inspiring people. I'm motivating people. I'm hustling in a positive way. I'm hiking up
Mm-hmm.
mountains. I'm having interviews, running networking groups. I'm overextending myself the way that I like to extend myself, but I
Yeah.
still am present in the moment. Not always,
Yeah.
because I do screw it up. You
Yeah.
know, this Sunday, I usually post on LinkedIn 6 days a week. Now I've decided to add a seventh day because LinkedIn crack has gotten me. And my wife and I went to a brunch, and there I am, head down in my phone. And at night, Christy turned to me and said, "I didn't see you today." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I was with you the whole day." She said, "No, you weren't." And that to me was a wake up call. So I can't do that again.
Yeah. Yeah. I think sometimes we just get caught up in everything and it's not just you, it's people just on social media, just, you get a text and we get that dopamine. It's like, oh, who texted me? And you kind of want to see it right away. And
Yeah.
it's just it's how we are operating these days and how we are functioning. Do your kids say anything to you when you're like on your phone like this?
No, oddly not. As you say that, it makes me think they don't, which is a little bit weird. Maybe that's just because they're young and I know they know what they know what I'm doing. My whole thing was always to show my kids this great work ethic and drive. And that's what depressed me the most when I had that 3 year, COVID mixed world that we lived in. They only saw me lazing around the house. And really, that's
Uh,
what I was doing. One summer, I remember every day I was floating in my swimming pool. That sounds great. Grass is always greener. And guess what? It was awesome for that first 2 weeks until you realize that the world is back and you're left behind. And it's not fun and
yeah.
exciting. So that's what was really depressing me, is that my children didn't see me as an example that they should live up to anymore. Um,
Mm,
but no, they haven't said anything yet, and I suspect
mm.
they will one day.
Yeah, it is. That is really interesting that they wouldn't. I mean, maybe you do a good job and you really do separate, or try not to be as head down as much as possible. Or maybe they're like, oh, dad's doing his thing, he's working, and it's just kind of like a whatever to them. But
Well, I make
I
sure
think
that
that,
there are moments where I will, when I am head down like that, I tell them exactly what I was doing. Or I'll call one of my daughters over and say, "Hey, look at this post. It did really well. What do you think about it? Read it." Right. So I do involve them in some things. And then there are those other moments where we're all guilty of it. They'll try to talk to me. I'm like, no, 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 I got to finish it. I'm a human.
yeah,
We're all human.
yeah,
It's okay.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that, as men and women or people have this balance of work life, family balance, it's getting harder and harder. And, the advice that you're providing, I think, has a lot of insight. One, what I'm taking away is you have to set aside time. Just like everything else, you have to set aside time in order for you to nurture anything and everything. And if you want to develop a skill set, you have to put aside time to practice that or do that over and over. Even a garden, you have to tend it periodically at the least, right? To make sure it's doing a great job. So, there's that. And then two, being cognizant of your own behaviors. I think some people, when you're the business owner and you're doing all these things and you have so many hats on, you're just like, go, go, go. But so you don't really you need to float out of your body and kind of look at yourself and think, what do I look like right now to other people? And, I'm guilty too. Sometimes because of the work that I do as well, I have my phone with out with friends or I'm kind of on all the time. There are times too, even for me, I'm like, hey, sorry, I have to do this thing real quick for a client or a talent. And I do feel bad. And sometimes I'll even just remove myself, right? Because it's better that I'm just not there and going like this than, maybe going to the bathroom or in the parking lot or something. So it's definitely difficult. And I think that, for you to have so much like self-awareness is really inspiring. And I'm sure, like you said, it took a long time for you to get there, but your hard efforts have paid off or are paying off, I guess you can say. Your day starts at 11, and
It's Eastern
I
time,
think a
by
lot
the
of,
way.
huh?
It's Eastern time.
Oh, okay. So technically 8 a.m. Pacific.
I don't
So
think it makes a difference. No, you know
no.
what it is? You got to get kicked in the nuts a few times before you realize that, you're screwing up. And I think I've been there all too many times. And you're right. Self-awareness is key. And I have learned on countless occasions, if you want to be the extroverted person that's preaching the message or on stage, then you have to be willing to be embarrassed. You have to be willing to make mistakes. You have to be willing to learn from those mistakes, but you need self-awareness. If you are not at least almost aware of how you come across to an audience, then you're going to fall short and you're going to fail. You know,
Hmm.
I enjoy my weaknesses. I've learned to delegate the things I don't want to do or I'm not good at. Or if I want to improve, I'll practice. I think everyone should take a message or a note on that. If you're not good at something, be willing to delegate. And self-awareness is
Hmm.
key. You have to reflect at what am I good at? What am I not good at? What do I want to spend time on? What do I don't want to spend time on? And one of those things is some of us are just not good at being parents. And it's important to realize if you're not good at being parents, well, guess what? You made a choice, like it or not. Maybe it wasn't a choice, but it's your reality. Now you have to work on being a better parent. And a lot of that has to do
Mm,
with being present. And something Christy had said to me is just because you're here doesn't mean you're present, right? And that's really important because sitting there, head down in your phone, sitting next to your children is not present. And these are words that I tell
mhm,
myself constantly because, again, I'm human.
mhm,
I'm guilty of the same dopamine fix as everyone else. But it's those words, it's the support of a supportive partner, the guidance of a partner that's with you. That makes all of the difference in the world. That is the success that you need in that balanced life. A partner that supports you and is willing to nudge you and be like, hey, pick your head up, pay attention to your kids. I hear that
mhm,
once a week
mhm.
now. Not twice, but once a week.
Do you find it harder to keep your principles and your timeline, of working and family is separate during the week or weekends? What's
Weekend,
harder to
weekends for
weekends?
sure. Yeah, so it's interesting. I love working. I love this is who I've been my whole life. I get the most excitement out of creating something from nothing and turning it into this blossoming tree. And, I also love the routine of being with my kids in the morning. And I love the most of all, dropping them off at school. That is my favorite because then it's peace and quiet. And then I'm in my zone for the rest of the day. The weekends, though, is more complex. That's the requirement of having to actually do something that's out of the normal routine for me. And as a creature of routine, it's hard, right? That's everyone together. And I have three daughters. That is really tough. There is high volume, high energy, lots of emotions. And that's just because they're young kids. So that to me is loud and it's complex and it's challenging. And then not to mention if I'm doing the social thing, there's that distraction as well. So weekends are a lot tougher for me, but it's a work in progress
Okay.
always. And when the hiking season gets warmer again, then I have activities that we can both enjoy together, right? All my kids and me.
Hmm. Yeah, that's I can see how weekends are harder. And yeah, your kids are they're fun.
Energetic. I'm not What's interesting is my mom would always say to me that you will always worry about your kids and their success and their futures and all that. I don't feel that. And maybe
Mm,
it's because the way I was raised was a little bit different. My parents weren't always present. I'm always present when I can be, but I'm always teaching my kids something new. Like the other day, one of my children, she was talking about running a business in school. And I started teaching her about P&Ls. She now knows how to calculate margins, revenue and profit, right? She knows what COGS is. We're working on SG&A next. So it's these little lessons where that keeps me from worrying if they're going to be on a successful path, if that makes any sense. I think just by
no, it
taking
does.
that time works.
Yeah, because you're giving them these tools to understand, to how to be like a business person, right? Than just uh, a worker somewhere here or there, but just to have like principles and desires. And I think when you start to understand, and not everyone is built to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. I believe that. But when you see COGS and you see P&L, and that gets you excited, and then you have goals, that's when I think that's like a first step, I think,
Yeah.
into being like, oh, you have the potential of being a business owner or an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So
No, absolutely. It's not a requirement though. Just for the record, I didn't know what a P&L truly was until I was 28 years old. Shocker,
yeah, yeah.
right?
I mean,
I remember
I don't know what age I knew it, but definitely in my late 20s
yeah. And
as well.
I wish I had listened to some advice early on when I was told you should take business classes in college. You should learn business concepts because the first time I was pressed on information that was needed on a P&L, I was embarrassed. There was this weird situation where we had won an account. The company that had the account stole it back. I escalated it. the COO of that company asked me what our SG&A was on the deal. And my response was strong to very strong because I had no idea what SG&A was. And then he knew I had no idea. He laughed and he said, "Why don't you ask your partners what the SG&A is on that deal and get back to me?" So I ran to my partner Mark's office and I said, "Hey, so and so asked me our SG&A on the deal," and he said, "What did you tell him?" Knowing I didn't know what it was, and I said, "Strong to very strong," and he laughed because it's a line from a movie. And he told me I was a jackass, and then we went through it. We learned, he told me what it was, and I'll never make that mistake again. It's selling general and administrative. Your costs for basically selling your solution and administrating it through. So yeah, I learned what that was that day. And that's when I said, what, I need to go to business school. I need to learn some concepts, and I need to, if I'm going to call myself a CEO, I better act like one too. It was a good wake up.
Yeah. Yeah. And, as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, I know first, you had twins and then you had your baby. So was it harder? I mean, I can't say because most people have one kid start, but you had two off the bat. Was it more difficult to have twins and balancing your work and business? Or like was it, and then, having your third, you kind of knew what the ropes were like, right? Because even though, I'm sure you're very hands-on, so it's like having still a newborn baby is a lot of work, right? So yeah, how was that having twins off the bat?
Um, Hell. No, I'm kidding. Not really. So we didn't know any different. So for us, it was we have these babies. Um, I will say I am definitely an overachiever. I did every night feeding, and this is not a knock on my wife. What we had learned, because this was our first and second all at once, if it was my wife's day or night to wake up and feed the kids, she's a sound sleeper. So I would set the alarm, and we learned you wake up before they wake up, which makes it a lot easier because then they're not screaming and crying and they're just dream feeding. So I would have to try to wake her up. By the time I was able to wake her up, I was so up that it made no sense for us to switch off. So I took all of the night feedings. It was rough. It was rough, but you become this robot. You're on autopilot to get it done. So I would wake up and feed one before she woke up, and then the other one would wake up naturally just from the noise and everything. And then the screaming and flailing started. I didn't sleep at all. I wanted my wife to sleep because she was all during the day and I was at work. I'm just a robot. I'm an overachiever. I'm OCD when it comes to getting things done. I had a method and a process about it. I changed practically every single diaper, in the nights, and I've changed thousands of diapers. Was very hands-on with my children in their early stages, but it's tougher having twins. I know this because having one was like the easiest thing in the world. Every friend I ever had that complained to us on how difficult it was to raise a baby, unless the baby was colicky, we would laugh like, "You're kidding. One is so easy. It's just two on one. It's so easy." But no, we got the experience of both. But I enjoyed it. I enjoy every moment that I can be in their lives. But if I'm being truthful, kids are tough. The hardest job that I've ever had is dealing with kids because it's completely irrational. They don't listen to reason. They don't hear my voice. Sometimes I have to yell at them, and it's like they lost their hearing. And I've learned, well, yelling doesn't work. So what do I do? Let me try whispering. The whispering doesn't work because they didn't hear me. So now I work on screen time. So I block their iPad, and all of a sudden, that worked. It's such a thankless job. It obviously worthwhile, but it's a hard job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's so inspiring to hear you, seeing how you juggled everything from the beginning, meeting your wife, girlfriend at the time, and then now having three beautiful girls. And, it's like you kind of rode this like roller coaster, it feels like hearing you
Still am.
talk.
I still am. My life, now that I'm back on a mission with purpose and passion, I'm back to who I was. I lost myself for a while. I really did, and it sucks. I feel like I lost 3 years of my life. And that's because of all of the things that are not spoken about and not taught in school. No one teaches you after your exit and you have the successful moment that if you don't do something right away, you're going to hit a depression and have no value anymore. That's not
Hmm.
taught about, right? It's a woe is you type of moment, but it should be taught about. There needs to be a succession plan. At 38 years old, retiring is not an option. And that's why I stayed on with the company that acquired us for a year. But then that pivot took place and COVID, you know, I don't blame anything other than myself. I could have done so much more, but I chose, ego, which is uncharacteristic of me and what got me to the first major goal. I chose my ego over anything else, and that was the wrong move. And it
Hmm.
took hitting rock bottom mentally, right? Not checking myself into somewhere, but in my head saying, you know what, I got to make a change. This isn't healthy thinking. It took that moment that really got me to open up again and to become normal in my world again.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sometimes we sometimes just have to hit that rock bottom,
Yeah.
to be able to know what greatness is or how great of what we have is. So, yeah, it's truly inspiring. So, thank you so much for taking the time this week. Anything you want to share before we go?
I took a hike, season 3. It's a good one. Listen to it. Every guest is as inspirational as the next. It's been an awesome season. We are, as with everything in life, the more practice, the better you get. So we have really dialed in the episodes. We're keeping them under an hour, around the 45 to 50-minute mark, which is more engaging. I'm enjoying them more. I don't listen to them until they come out. That's just my thing. I don't want to be part of the editing process. We have professionals that do that. We have video. So, we have camera people that follow us around. They do an awesome job. Listen to it. It's great. And follow us on LinkedIn because we're putting out some really cool, fun content.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Darren. We will see you on the next one.
Love it. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you. Bye bye.